We will call the meeting to order here at 8:04 a.m. Few items here to clean up. FY25 budget. So we obviously had the Article 2 pass at town meeting last week, which is great. I checked in informally with Tom at town meeting just on the process and what we talked about finance around, just like when do we ask for the money? Amanda brought up a great point of like the warrant committee turns over on June 30th. And so obviously we had the two things where like, do we wait after July 1st at the actual final number? Do we go before? Asked Tom his thoughts. His thought was we should come in June, ask for the full 700. And then so whatever we don't use, we'll tie out free cash. So he was going to email me back with some dates. They're obviously working towards some warrant articles for the June town meeting. And so they are continuing to meet regularly. And so it's gonna let me know probably first week in June.
So can you talk about that from a processing for a second? So the article passed, which meant that they agreed to the funding. So then what, so now is it a process of transferring what, because it wouldn't be another article.
No, it's not an article. It is the money was transferred to the town's reserve account.
Right.
Which is under the control of the warrant committee.
Oh, right. Okay.
So now we just need to go to the warrant committee to ask, similar to any other town department.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So he said typically when other departments have done this, they come first or second week of June. So that's what he anticipates happening. So he will share some dates and I have those. I will share with y'all to figure out what.
I was sending the link.
So that is the last step in terms of that's the last step for the funding article. And then obviously we need the ongoing monitoring of the budget, which we got last time. Katie, do you have an idea of when the next time, what did we talk about the next time we get an updated budget projection?
So
Additional payrolls.
So our next one is our next finance subcommittee meeting. Are we doing the 21st? Meeting on the 21st.
Great question. Awesome. We don't currently have something scheduled, so we can kind of talk about that now. In the agenda when we want to meet next. Yeah, we could do next Wednesday. What you would have something ready to review for next Wednesday? That's a time.
So there is we'll process payroll this week. And so hopefully that will get posted. We just once it's processed, we do have to wait for the town departments to just post that in the accounting system. And then I can pull the reports and just create an updated, projection based off of that information. So it would be a pretty quick turnaround for the 21st, but I can certainly do that. Or we can also do the following week. I have something in my calendar on May 28th. So
I think I was up this way. You're meeting every other week. Standing calendar.
So I think the 28th would just give a little more time to be able to go through the projections. The tricky part, so when the payroll posts, the information that we're getting from these payrolls are the stipend payments, or kind of like the payments that are extra and not a part of the salary. The salary piece is just will continue up until June, and then in June we process a lump sum payment. So that payment in June includes the payments from the summer. And so, but those are more kind of like predictable in nature, but the accounting system, we've been talking about this kind of throughout the year. it doesn't have a mechanism to project out what is left for the salary payment, so I'm essentially doing that manually. So it does just take a little bit of time from when the information is posted to the system, and then it's just doing, going through that process of calculating the encumbrance to be able to come up with the report.
Can I ask a question about that?
Mhm.
The system, not the details.
Sure.
You just said. So do we use the same system as the team?
We do,
And-
yes.
And so is this atypical of the ability to project out? Like historically,
Mhm,
have you been able to do that with
Mhm.
this?
mhm.
That's where you work.
Different systems have the ability to do the projections right in the system. Mhm. So some of the other systems that I've used in different districts, it has that in the system, so you don't have to manually calculate it.
What is the system we use here?
We use SoftWrite, but we use an older version of SoftWrite. So when I was in Duxbury, we had a upgraded version of SoftWrite that had more of a web-based system for the accounts payable platform. We use the older version of SoftWrite here. Mhm. And we've talked about, like, we've kind of earlier in the year before we were truly kind of more focusing on the budget and the budget preparation, we did talk about looking at our systems and is there any opportunity for us to potentially look at a different platform that would not only be more helpful for the accounting functions, but also for human resources and some of that other, some of the other tracking that we're just all kind of, many of the town departments are doing manually right now.
My experience has been that it's been much more automated.
Yes,
than case.
it's
yes.
I mean,
really manual.
Yeah, that's.
So it's a town issue, which directly impacts us.
Mhm.
Great.
So I'm sorry, should I have something prepared for the 21st or should we do the 28th?
Yeah, that's still the discussion.
Okay.
I think we need it's the next key date here is the warrant committee, right? Which we don't quite have, but if we
Right.
assume that's the first week in June, which would be the earliest.
Right.
Then maybe the 28th, the 25th, this makes more sense.
Right.
We're closer to that.
Yep, and then, because then we have a June meeting,
Mhm.
after the.
That's actually, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a good point. I would think that process wise, do we need to vote at school committee
To
to request it from the warrant committee, or because we already voted the initial allocation, is that good enough?
Could double check, I think it's like, yesterday was good enough, but we should double check.
Okay. If you could do that, that'd be great. So we will plan on doing the up next FY25 budget projection on 5/28.
Okay.
Anything else with FY25? Coming to the end here. FY26 budget, town meeting debrief, we obviously got the budget passed. Overwhelming, so that's fantastic. Thank you, Katie, for all your work on that, and Regina so much as well. It's great, it's much more overwhelming book than last year's budget, given all the challenges we've had, I think that's probably a great job communicating.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anything else specifically on that budget, but we have some new business items, some next year's budget. And we'll obviously schedule out the forecasting, that's right, the recasting
Mhm.
for one of our meetings in the beginning of August.
Okay, sure.
Tell us, you know, what you think.
I think it typically, because there's still so much hiring that happens in August, it may make more sense to do kind of the beginning of September, once we've completed all of our hiring, because the hiring really is the biggest portion that drives that recast process. And so we just want to make sure that everyone kind of is where they will be for the start of the school year, and then that gives us the snapshot of where we need to kind of adjust.
Is there any, is there anything that comes of John Phelan starting in June that would, like, is there anything that you guys do that he would have input on the budget, or is it just, it's more that timing for the hiring? Like, is there anything that there would be recast between June and August as he's coming in?
Potentially, if we just look at some of the work that, just because he didn't have the opportunity to participate in the budget kind of creation process. So I would just think that if there is any work that he is going to do in this upcoming year, that he would feel that he may potentially, we would have to allocate resources to. I do very much, just based on some of the conversations that John and I have had, we both just really want to concentrate on making sure that we are, fiscal year 26, we are solid, that we're kind of sticking to each one of the lines as appropriated. The staffing, of course, is going to change because of all of those shifts with the hiring and the turnover. But I would imagine, and I would have to have this conversation with John, that he would want to keep the kind of more of the general expense lines. And so examples would be like professional development, any contracted services where we would potentially bring in outside vendors and have them come in and either kind of be a speaker or run professional development for us. I think that there could be some opportunities to like kind of reallocate or make some changes, but I don't imagine that they would be major. And I would think that he would probably want to stay within whatever was allocated in the original budget.
Great. Anything else on 26? Then we can jump down to a couple of new business things. Townwide Finance Committee. So this is obviously something we talked about here, came up at the town meeting as well, point of discussion. I think in order to begin the process of kind of working with, we talked about this at a very high level. And so, but to move the process forward with the select board committee, we just want to make sure we are on the same page and then discuss it full school committee on Wednesday to make sure full school committees on the same page of like, what are we looking for in this? Is there any input that folks have as we start talking to these groups? I think the initial plan, as the town administrator threw out, was like a 2-2-2 model, as John Cohane kind of shared previously, with 2 board, 2 school, 2 select board. Obviously, at town meeting, it also came up with the idea of bringing on out residents of the town outside of those 3 boards, number, how they're selected, the things that would still need to be determined. I guess that's pause there, like that idea of this kind of 2-2-2. Does that make sense to folks? And then what are people's thoughts on having other citizens participate in this, as was suggested by Mike Zulis? We've already had outreach by one resident as well, expressing interest.
I mean, I think the 2-2-2 makes sense. From the standpoint of the residents, I think you could look at it 2 ways. One is the warrant committee are representative residents. They're nominated or selected from the town moderator, and there's a process for getting there. I guess and this isn't a deal breaker, it's just my only concern would be the process for what's the process for reaching out to people, like she's like the selection process, all of that would be, and not that it should be a barrier, but I think it's just, I think that would take a lot of consideration.
I think, could I come in?
Yeah, please.
The model that Nick described sounds good. I'm supportive of having a resident on the committee. I do think, and Amanda, you were just talking about process. I think what I heard from Chair Wells at town meeting was that this was a go pending a vote from the select board, which I assume will happen very quickly. Selecting a resident to serve on the committee could take a long time, or could take a little while. You know, we have a new moderator, there's an application process, I assume, et cetera. Process wise, I would love for this committee to get active as quickly as possible, and not have to wait necessarily for a resident to be selected, although I do support a resident being selected and put on the committee.
And my thoughts on the process, I don't think the selection would go through the town moderator unless we wanted it to. And if this is part of like, how are we selecting? My thought would be if we are having residents on the committee, I'm generally in support of that because I think just whatever we can do to build transparency and trust and like, just like make people feel like this is a process they can, you know, believe in and support, is I'm in favor of. And I think obviously we would need to make sure whoever's coming on has financial background and is like a positive contributing member of the group, which I know there are going to be tons of those people present. But I think from a selection standpoint, if we say, you know, the school committee appoints somebody, I'd assume this follows similar to what happens with the Sustainable Milton. Is that the committee that we had a resident join?
Mm-hmm.
Know what I'm talking about?
I think so, the one for.
Where we essentially posted on the website of, hey, here's a committee, the opening, the school committee points, we get the resumes to say, hey, here are the people who are interested, here's their resumes, we review them and say, oh, this person's got a really strong financial background, or they've been on the warrant committee before, or whatever, you know, criteria we think is important, and select, you know, ultimately, like some of our hiring process will select that member to join. Yeah. Totally blanking on the committee who did this. But I don't actually know if we did this last year with you, because we did this 2 years ago with, and Anna and Val, maybe you can help me here. But again, the woman who is doing great work, she didn't come and do any updates last year, but she's on like the environmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her name's Lisa Troy.
Yes, thank you, Val.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
So Lisa Troy, so in that process, again, 2 years ago, we got applicants from a bunch of people and they gave us their resume. I assume it'd be something similar. And then the school committee and finance committee could review them first and share them, or we could just review them at full school committee and submit all the resumes and select somebody to appoint this, what essentially would be a townwide committee. But I do agree with you, Nathan. I think, you know, that is something where as long as the committee has quorum, it could meet even before those positions are filled. There are lots of committees where, you know, there are openings and the committee still needs to meet. So move the work forward. So we could do that kind of as we are moving this along.
I guess my only question on that, from the selection standpoint, would be if it's the select board, like who's weighing in on that, on the application piece.
Yeah.
Or would it be this, you know?
So the way it works with other boards is essentially like each board has a person that they can pick.
Right.
So I guess my suggestion in this situation would be that we do something similar where the school committee has a person, select board has a person.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
select board appoints their own person. So we don't have to like come to agreement on a single person, but we get two different individuals to join, both appointed by the board.
Yeah.
So in that situation, be an 8-member group.
Yeah.
Over. Ability. Nathan?
Yeah, that makes sense. Sort of defer to the group on how that works. Do we? I'm coming in a little late, obviously, to this discussion. I understand that previously, in a year or more ago, that this committee and the select board's finance committee would meet periodically, and I don't know if there was a sort of mandate for those discussions, but are we going to be will this joint committee have a sort of new charter? Will we have to go through that process of figuring out what the exact purpose is, or has that already been hammered out?
Yeah, no, it has not.
Okay.
Yeah, so my understanding of what this came up is, it's essentially taking the place of what was just the school committee, finance committee, cooperative meetings that were happening 2 years ago. Did not happen this past year, but altered to bring in the warrant committee and these additional residents. I think those meetings were mostly discussions of town revenue and expense forecasts, which we were able to do this year just through Nick Milano. But mostly talking about the school budget. I mean, for legitimate reasons, the school committee wasn't talking too much with the select board on the town budget side. My sense of this town-wide finance meeting is it is a little bit more broad in scope in terms of what we'd be talking about. Obviously, the school budget being the biggest piece, but the town-wide budget overall and long-term budget forecasting, trying to do that a bit more for the town, which is a place we could improve. But we don't, in terms of how we establish it and how we define the charter, I think that those are things that would still need to be fully written out. Not sure if we need to do that for the finance committee. It's established, or if we establish it, and that's one of the first actions of the townwide finance committee.
I feel like it would be part of it, just because I think that they're coming with a perspective as well on it. And I think it would be useful to hear that prior to. Like, I think that it seems like if we talk about it here and have a sense of what we're looking for and hoping for, and then schedule that first meeting. And in that first meeting, that might be a good place to map that out, but with everybody sort of coming with a perspective on it.
Isn't this committee a revival of a past committee? So I wonder if there's any documentation of what those roles were and responsibilities.
Was there one with the warrant? Did it include the warrant committee? Was it
That one town meeting member said, I had blank on who.
Years ago.
Yeah,
Was it?
former school committee member.
Sheila?
Maybe it was Sheila. Yeah, that might be right. Yeah, again, I know school committee and select board would meet. The history of having warrant committee and how consistently warrant committee would come. So it's real. This is one ad hoc thing. Was this happening consistently? I can reach out to Sheila, actually, just say nothing is happening.
Mark, what you might be remembering at town meeting, Mike Zulis mentioned that there was a committee back in 2015, I think, that was looking at a integration of town and school functions. Somehow I think it was a recommendation out of the warrant committee. And then Mike spoke at town meeting saying that there actually was a committee 12 years ago that was looking at doing all of this that never really completed its work.
Yeah, I remember that one as well. I think.
Oh, are you thinking of something else?
I think Sheila also was saying, as a school committee member, again, that they met with select board and warrant committee together. I think that's what Regina's referring to. But yeah, no, you're right. Mike might also have some document or be able to point towards some documentation of that group. I don't know if that was finance specific or connected to the consolidated facilities work, but that happened 15 years ago. That happened around when the new schools were completed, where they started consolidated facilities, I believe. So that would have been before 12 years. So I can reach out to Mike about what he was referring to.
I think that there are other towns that already have the tri-board committees set up. Would it be helpful to see if they have documentation?
Yeah.
We could potentially like the structure.
That'd be great. Do you know?
Okay, I do. I actually met someone at a NASBO conference who was a vendor, but he is a member of one of the, I think it's either Sharon or Avon, one of those communities. So I have his contact information. I can reach out to him and see if he has any information documentation that he'd be willing to share.
Right.
We can ask the other two women from two neighboring towns, Roxbury Committee, and just go some things on structure.
Structure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
Look into this.
Mhm.
Uh, so,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Hannah.
Thank you. I do actually like Katie's idea. I just feel like, I know over the last several years, we've had some not so great budget practices. So I know we've had different forms of committees in the past, but I think really reaching out and kind of broadening our like outreach to other towns and figuring out connecting in terms of best practices versus things that we have done before that might or might not have worked is probably not, I think just kind of expanding out would be, a better way to move forward and just kind of learning from what other towns have done and what's been successful and what hasn't versus things that were done, committees we had, but then they were went away and so on and so forth, so it's just it's nice to be able to hear people say oh, this worked we used to have this. But again, looking back at the last, several years and where we ended up, I don't know if any of those processes were successful. So I would just definitely reach out to other communities that, work better, maybe just at that.
They were probably listening.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
part of that could have been just the turnover of.
That's true.
There'd have been so much
Yeah.
turnover, but
That's good.
yeah, no, it's a fair point. I think we can learn a lot from other places. Great. Okay, another question I had was just, I think Virginia, you mentioned, somebody that the select board has indicated they need to vote on this. Establish this committee. Do we need to vote on this? I assume we don't have one on the agenda for Wednesday.
The agenda. On the agenda. Okay, anyway.
So would this be similar to?
Oh, yes,
the
because we don't
other-
have a meeting this week.
We
It's
don't,
next
yes,
week.
next
Yes,
week.
it's okay.
Would this be similar to the other, like the finance subcommittee, all of the subcommittee work? Would you appoint members or have members kind of say what they were interested in, which boards that they're interested in participating? Would it happen at the same time or?
Yeah, I don't know if to create a new committee, if we need to vote on that as a school committee,
Okay.
or I think that's my initial question, just like,
I can.
do we even have to, we have to have a school committee wide vote. So if we could determine that,
Right.
to authorize school committee.
Establish,
Establishes.
yeah,
We can look
Yeah.
at that, yeah.
yeah,
My gut feeling is. I don't have to talk about feelings. Because it's a procedure.
Okay, yeah, if we could determine that, so now we need to vote on
Yeah.
next Wednesday then. Great, and then I assume once it becomes a committee, you're right, Katie, that it would be one of those things. Figure out. Is there? Yeah, I guess it's just the finance, because we want two people and there's three people on finance, so it can't be everybody on finance. It's both people on finance, even if it's two people who are both on finance, it would become posted subcommittee. It's subcommittee, and the only thing about that is we now said we are hosting some finance subcommittee recordings.
Mhm.
I think we could record those, post those meetings now. Group from the select board. So maybe we look at those as like, it's a different meeting and it's not going against our policy to have two finance committee members on that, if that's what happens. I don't know, that's another, there's
Yeah.
these complicating pieces that are a little bit on the construction. It's also possible that we want to have one finance person, non-finance person, but yes, Anna, your thoughts?
So how does that work though? So if you have two members from finance, but we also have our cross-posted meeting so that all members of the school committee can be involved in finance and there are, and we can participate in the discussion. How does that work when we have this 2-2-2 meeting? Because I think we've run into the same problem that we had before where we ended up going into cross-posting our meetings.
Yeah, I don't see how we would be able to cross-post this as a full school committee meeting, right? It would be a subcommittee across these three different entities. So otherwise it'd be full select board, full school committee, full warrant committee. It's obviously
Right. I'm just wondering, like, how does that happen? Because I know the reason for us cross-posting our finance meetings, the finance meetings were subcommittee meetings, and now we started cross-posting it after February. So I'm just curious, like how, like to be able to participate in those discussions that come out of town and warrant discussions. Like, how does that happen? And if it's only two members, and I'm sure several of us want to be part of that discussion as well. So how do we kind of determine that? And how does it get relayed back to our full school committee, finance subcommittee meetings, and then to our full school committee meetings out of that? I don't know.
Yeah, how it is selected is, again, I assume the way any other committee is selected that we put in. But again, I don't know if we want to put any guardrails or not around membership, like the part of the discussion of like,
Right.
Are these two people who are on the finance committee currently or not? Maybe it doesn't matter, Anna, to your points. Sorry, Nathan, you had your hand up. You jump in.
No, you can finish your thought, Mark. It's fine.
Yeah, and I guess the other thought there is, I assume the way the information is going to need to get back is through meeting updates. Right? I think the process, as you named it, Anna, is the right one where this committee seems like essentially a subcommittee of a subcommittee, almost.
Right.
Get it wrong, but like that, like the members of that the 222 committee, we'll call it, would need to kind of report back to the finance committee. And then that committee would need to report back to full school committee as it's happening now, but not have the cross-posted elements within the 222. I assume
Where you get full school committee input would be at the update to the finance subcommittee.
yes, both the full school committee and the
Right.
updates to the finance committee. I mean, this is the other piece of the construction. I don't know if this would be a publicly posted meeting. Because again, I think it would depend on the construction of the members. To form a finance committee would need to, it's not a quorum of anybody in the select board. Definitely wouldn't be a quorum of the warrant committee members, that maybe wouldn't need to be a publicly posted meeting. We wouldn't want to anyways, because it's a
Yeah.
townwide finance, and the whole point is
Mhm.
to provide greater transparency to the site.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that there are a lot of layers that we're just kind of creating, and things get lost when there are so many layers. So I in theory, it works great to have a 222 subcommittee, but like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I want to be very involved in finance going forward. So, so if it's, and be part of all those discussions. So I think that's going to be where I don't think just getting an update at a finance subcommittee that's cross-posted or at a full school committee is going to be the same as being part of those discussions if they're with other town committees.
Nathan, did you still have a?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I don't know. So here's how I'm interpreting the situation. I don't know if it's exactly the same as how you all are talking about it or not. I can't totally tell. Seems like there's going to be this townwide finance committee, which may have two school committee members on it. That will not replace our school finance subcommittee, right? That will still happen, and that will be cross-posted for the full school committee. That's my understanding. It seems like having the same, I don't know how many, it's whoever is officially designated to the school finance subcommittee, it seems like should also be on this townwide finance committee. It seems a little more seamless. But I don't know exactly how that works. And then I would assume that the full school committee could attend and watch the townwide meeting. We wouldn't be able to participate like this probably. That's kind of how, like, I don't see the townwide finance committee as a replacement of our school subcommittee, finance subcommittee.
Correct. Where?
If I
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
I just, when I think about that committee, just going back to the intent of that committee, and that committee is really the suggestion to either reestablish or to establish this committee was coming from some of the, I would say, some of the pain points that we were feeling during the process of this year. And I think those pain points were, we were talking very much from like the school lens, but then in trying to just get more information from the town side, and in trying to make sure that the select board and the warrant committee felt like they were getting enough information from the school department regarding our expenses in our budget and our budget proposal. And so I think all of that being said, I think if you had different members from my perspective, just in thinking about kind of the process of this year, if there were different members from the school finance subcommittee and then this kind of town committee, I just think it would get confusing, right? Just making sure that all of those members were essentially on the same page with the information that we are trying to communicate out, and also the information that we're trying to bring in that will inform the work we do. So I think that would be,
Right, it's just add on to that. So it does feel like, so it did exist before. I think at least the subcommittee, the select board and the school committee had that combined previously.
yes,
It feels like the addition would be the warrant committee, so that somebody from the warrant, like the finance side, so that they were attending our meetings, but without participating. And I think it just changes the ability to participate so that questions can be asked. So I think it adds clarity throughout the process.
yes.
As opposed to adding a layer where they come back with questions. And so in some ways, like I don't want to overcomplicate it. I think it's almost reestablishing plus, just adding people on as opposed to it being a whole new thing. To that point, though, I think if there are things, Katie, that you, as we were saying before, reaching out, and there are things that people have done, like best practices or things that have worked, reach out to people that make it make it a better working group, then I think that helps it. So, I don't know, that just, I don't think it's this whole other, I think it's sort of a combination, right? It's what we've done plus, but just reestablishing that communication that got lost last year.
Yeah, I tend to agree, that make no sense. Streamlining of the communication through just the continuation of members of the finance committee, joining and the way of any school committee member to engage is that we would want to advocate that this becomes a public posted meetings, be viewed by any member. That's something that we would obviously need to run for. So hopefully be on the same page with that.
I think that if you publicly post to, I know that they're having conversations about having a community member participate is great, but then also posting does give, it is a public meeting. So if anyone wanted to attend and listen to the conversations, that they have the opportunity to do that.
I think as we're talking about it, the important piece will be, or I think the piece that will give it direction, I think, is coming together and discussing almost the charter or whatever the goal of this subcommittee is. So that it is, so that it isn't so broad and ill-defined, but really like going back to saying, okay, what was the intent for pulling this group together? What's the intent for adding in the warrant committee? What would be the intent of adding in a community member from that? And so, and figuring out like where the value is, what the purpose is, the frequency, what are the things we're going to be talking about? Because right now I think it just does feel very broad and and so then that does bring up a lot of questions. So I think having that meeting where we come together and talk about, kind of we had talked about before, is just getting a sense from the select board as well, or committee on, okay, this is where we're viewing this. What are your thoughts and how do we pull it together? And then I think then it would make sense. I think I just would give it more clarity, but I don't think we just haven't had that discussion yet. I think a lot of people have ideas in their mind. And so we're trying to bring it together. But I think to your point, like reaching out like you had to chair of the select board and war committee and coming together and having just that initial discussion. I think.
Yeah, just to make sure I'm not meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they have on the docket to vote for. Reach out. We need to see something.
So why do they, just from a procedural standpoint, why do they need to vote on the establishment of it?
Well, I assume it's similar to the question I have of like, do we need to vote on it? So
Right.
I assume it's some internal process of establishing a committee. They have something where they need to vote on it. I don't know particularly why they're voting on it tomorrow versus any other day. Because I agree with you, there's still things up in the air in my mind, like I wouldn't be ready to vote on this tomorrow. But that's not something I can, I assume it's just an internal process, but I can try and check with Nick on having any clarity around exactly what they're thinking. I don't know if they're voting on the structure or just.
Right, because I think it's important to move it forward. But it's important to move it forward with thought. I don't like it's sort of, I don't want it to be like, it just doesn't feel like we want to be so reactive. Like, I think it's important to do it. I think we all see the value in it. So then, but then having intent around it, understanding the structure. So to that end, if they're voting on the establishment, but I don't know if their vote, then they would have to say what the structure of it is. And so if we haven't come together, I'm not sure that that makes sense at this point, but that's their.
I think with anything with finance and specific to municipal finance, as we've seen this year, the timing of it will be really important too. And so having an established timeline similar to, we have our school committee budget calendar. So having a similar kind of calendar, maybe board calendar, just to say like the action points that will happen during the budget process, because when we were talking about this committee, we were essentially talking about it kind of like late in the process. And so I think just it will be really helpful just from my standpoint, just so I'm providing the correct information that you need to have these conversations. But I think just kind of being mindful about having that timeline kind of set.
All right, so the things we want to do, we still need to do on this are, y'all, Katie, Virginia, y'all are gonna confirm what we need from a school committee process. We need to vote on it, what the policy is. Amanda, Katie, y'all are going to look into information from other towns as to what they're doing with these types of, and they have a purpose. I can still probably reach out to Mike and Shiv, see if they have any information on these prior things, to see if that's something that can help guide our conversation. I can reach out to Nick, the town administrator, just on the select board vote, if they have any more information they're working off of as relates to the construction we need to be aware of. Seems like we should have a initial, like, based on this information, an initial conversation with warrant committee, select board, just on like, does this information align with what they are thinking? And if not, what are they thinking? So that I can come back to this group to talk about it further. Okay. So I don't. Hope we're gonna have time to vote, to do all this and then vote on the 21st. So that's something we can until the June meeting.
It might be, because I think then we're going to, we're going to be sending out I have to figure out the timing for people's interest in the subcommittees, so that could be a piece of it. Because we're just finishing up, I mean, everybody would finish up this year, and then that timing would actually, I think, work,
Yeah.
because it's for the next big upcoming year.
Outcome.
Yeah.
The other thing you had raised previously is the John Phelan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's,
His thoughts or input on how he's seen this work or
Yeah.
not work in other places he's been, in Milton or others.
Yeah.
So I'm, if he's coming in, that's something. I'll-
Yeah.
And
It's on, I typed it on my John list.
Perfect, great, okay.
And I just, there is a school committee policy just around subcommittees of the school committee. And the first point just says the subcommittee will be established through action of that committee.
Okay, so we do need. We need to do that. What?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I don't know when the select board meets again after this, but I don't know if been talking, when you're going to be talking to Nick, does it make sense to have our conversation about this prior to them voting on it? So that there's clarity around what we're voting on. It's not, I know we don't control that or manage it, but I just think so that whatever we're all establishing is consistent. So what their vote is consistent with what.
Yes, I agree. I'll check with Nick. I mean,
Yeah.
even the language of, that we're constructing the same, I don't know if it needs all the details of the
Yeah.
exact, not sure.
I don't know.
Never established a committee before, so we'll figure this out together. I'm also not 100% sure it's on the agenda. I just know that based on that email
Yeah.
that Nick sent, he was hoping to, seemed like he was trying to move quickly on it,
Yeah.
but it's possible it's not actually on the agenda. So I will check in. All right. We only have a few minutes left and we have a hard stop with a bunch of members, so I'm going to skip over the discussion of the finance report structure this week and then jump to future agenda items. Just want to make sure we're clear on kind of what action things. Katie at the start of the year had a list of things we wanted to go through and we got some of them done, but obviously other priorities came up and delayed a few things. I think at an upcoming meeting, one thing I had is you referenced it, the committee calendar. I think looking back at that and seeing how that played out or didn't play out this year, again, given things change and, you know, what changes or other things we want to add for next year. So I think just reviewing that calendar to frame us for next year will be helpful. You had sent a list of some other things that we wanted to talk through.
We do, at the full school committee meeting, we will have to, there will be a vote to just accept the bids for transportation. I don't know if that's something that we should discuss at finance subcommittee first, or if it can just go to the full school committee. There was only one bidder, so it is not, there's not a lot to discuss. But I'm more than happy to bring information here first. That's helpful. If not, it can just go to public school.
Are we pressed on time for the acceptance? Does that need to happen next Wednesday? I'm sorry, 26th.
We have to vote on the 21st. We should.
Okay. But we actually, right now, I don't know if we're meeting next week. So I think it's that.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I guess to share my general thoughts are like if there's large contract things that we can talk about it here at a time beforehand in case there's any thing, but otherwise probably not that big a deal.
Okay.
Especially if it's only one vendor. There are other things the other thing we had on the list was, again, kind of discussion of these finance report structures. It's we want to have a continued conversation about townwide finance committee. There.
This might not be for, I mean, the one thing we have talked about, we need to send out dates for dates is like a governance meeting, so maybe talking about if there are thoughts, I don't know if that's just for that governance meeting, but probably similarly, if there are things that we want to talk about to change in the process or in the calendar or in the way that we all work together, and that might also dovetail with that select board, you know, that other meeting that we're talking about, but I think but that just might be something that we talk about in governance meetings. But I think that piece would be important.
Yeah.
Katie, did you want anything else from school?
You said the community school salaries here. Something we need to vote on for the end of the year. So that's something we need to talk about here first.
We should vote that, yes. So that would go into effect as I believe it's 7/1, but I can confirm if we typically do it as of 7/1 or if we do it as of the start of the school year. But I think that the committee has in the past voted to approve the salary scale. I don't know if that has been a conversation at finance subcommittee.
Are we changing the salary scale?
Yes, there's an update. And it's just a change with a cost of living increase. There's no like structural changes to this scale.
Do we need to vote that next on the 21st?
That could wait till.
Okay. Sure, then if we could talk about it on the 28th
Okay,
briefly.
sure.
Great.
Mm,
The MPS grants manual.
MPS grants manual, we can, that is just for, the state and federal grants. And so we should have a grants manual that is reviewed and approved by the school committee, just in place. The grants are a part of the audit that, so when the town auditors come in, that's the piece that they'll look at for the school department is our federal grants. So I just want to make sure that we have that grants manual, that it's been reviewed, that it's been updated and reviewed. And the auditors come in a little bit later in the year, but I think that's one piece that I'm not sure it's been looked at in the past, so could just be worth looking at it again. And that really just talks about kind of like some of the internal controls that we use with the grants and who's responsible for overseeing and administering the grants internally here.
And required.
And required, yes. Yeah,
Is that also something we should try and discuss on the 28th, or does we should?
I think that could probably wait until we have a few things for the 28th, so that can definitely wait. That's not something where we have to have it done kind of in the next couple of weeks. We do have some time, but I just wanted to make sure that I noted it, so.
I know we are at time here, folks. So we're not, right now, from future meeting dates, we are not meeting next week. We're meeting on Wednesday, the 28th would be our next meeting. And then, should we meet on the 4th? Have another meeting kind of before school committee. The 28th and 4th. We already had one, I think, scheduled for the 11th. I don't know if that'll be necessary, but those three would kind of carry us through probably to the end of the year.
Great.
So 28th, 4th, and 11th. And we'll see if the 4th is necessary.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Then I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:01.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day, Anna. Bye, Val.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.